Welcome to Tech Primers. In this video, we are going to see how to use Spring Security in a Spring Boot application to do authentication with the data from a database. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a Spring Boot application with Spring Security inside it, and then we are going to authenticate a username and password by connecting to a database and using Spring Security to do that. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to create a application called security DB example. So as usual, I'm going to the Spring Initializer website where I can create a Spring Boot application out of the box. So what do I need is I need a dependency for the web. I need dependency for security. I need the JPA and I need the MySQL connector. So that's it, right? So I need security JPA. Yeah. So I have added dependencies for the Spring Web, which is Spring MVC, and then I have also added Spring Security dependency. Along with that, I'm adding the JPA and MySQL. So this is going to use Hibernate for connecting to the database and retrieving our username and password. Okay. So let me generate the project. So meanwhile, I have created some tables already. So I have a user table. Okay, this user table is going to have user ID, active flag, email address, username, last name, and password. Okay, so right now I'm not going to use any encryption mechanism for the password, but you can use any encryption or encoding technique for storing the password. So I'll show you how to do that as well. So and then there is a role table which has the roles which are there in the uh, current system. Okay, and then finally there is a user role which is going to be a relationship between the user and the role. So that is just another table. Okay, so let me save this project. I'll just unzip this project so that we can open this in IntelliJ. Okay, I think this is the one. Yeah, so let it open. Meanwhile, I'll just give you a brief understanding of what is Spring Security. So Spring Security is a framework which is provided by Spring again. So it uses some authentication and authorization mechanism to give you control over how you access the web pages and control the web pages or the REST endpoints. Okay, or your basically your web server. Okay, so it can control the authentication and the authorization part of your web application. So Spring Security provides that. So if you are not using a Spring Boot application, you can use directly Spring Security and then go ahead and secure your application. So secure web server. If you are using Spring Boot application, it is much simpler because Spring Boot provides easy support for Spring Security. Okay, so that is what we are going to see here now. But you can leverage this knowledge whatever I'm going to share here to create a Spring security application, which is not a Spring Boot application. You can secure any existing web server with Spring Security. Okay, so let's go ahead and create some classes, right? So I'm going to create a resource. So that is the REST endpoint which is going to be secured, and we are going to see how to secure that as well. So let's say I'm going to call this as hello resource. Okay, I'm just going to annotate it with the REST controller, and I'm going to annotate it with REST mapping. I'm going to call it REST slash hello. Okay, so I'll write one REST endpoint which I can expose it. So I'm just saying get mapping. I'll just say all. Okay, I'm just saying all just for simplicity. Okay, I have one like this. So let's create one more REST endpoint with saying secured slash all. Okay, so I'm just going to say secured hello. Secured hello. Okay, so I have basically two REST endpoints, one as all and one as secured all. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add security configurations. So before doing that, we can create the model which we require. So basically the user tables which are there, right? So I'm going to say I'm going to mark this as entity. So I'm going to use Spring Hibernate JPA, Spring JPA. Okay, I'm just saying table, and I'm going to say table name as user. Okay. So I have already created some template, live template in IntelliJ so that I can easily write the code. So I will just import everything. Okay, role, we have to create a role. So meanwhile I'll align this. So what I'm doing here is I have created a user ID, okay, which is going, these are all columns basically. So these are all column names: user ID, email, password, name, last name, and active. These are all the column names which we saw in the database here. Okay, so this is a test database which I have. So we are going to connect to this database and then query the user details from this table. Okay, so these are the different fields, and I have created a role relationship. So I'll go ahead and create this guy as well. Actually, I should have created the users inside model. I'll put it inside model. I'll create the role as well. So role is another entity and it is a table as well. So table name is role. So what are the fields in role? Let me check. What are the fields? So we have role ID and role. So role ID is integer and role is string. So we are going to say role ID. I'm going to annotate it with column. And this is going to be the ID. And this is generated, right? Generated value. I'm going to say strategy is auto. Okay. So that this will be generated automatically by Hibernate. The next one is the user ID, right? Role. Okay, basically this is the role. Okay. Okay, so we have created all the necessary classes. So I'll just create our constructor and the getters and setters. Okay, so done. Let's go to the users. So let's go to the users and make the users perfect. So users, we have created the classes, we have created the variables basically, and I'll now create the constructor, which is none. You don't need any constructor, and then I'll create the getters and setters. Okay, I think that's it. So we have created the model now. So now we need the repositories, right? So we need to create the repository. So let me go ahead and create the repository. I'll create a new package. I'll create a users repository for the user class. So based on this repository, we will be querying the users class and then retrieving the information. So I'm just saying users repository extends JPA repository, and this is going to be users. The primary key, what is the primary key? Is it integer? Yeah, it is integer. So I'm just saying integer. Okay. So that's it. Our repository is ready. Now, once our repository is ready, we need to inject these repositories to the Spring Boot application, right? So let's create a config. So let's create a config class called security configurations, because it's going to have all the security related configuration. I'll annotate it with that configuration, and this is where now I need to enable the JPA repository. So I'll say enable JPA repositories. I'll say base packages classes. So I'll just mention the class name because we have only one repository. I'll just say users repository dot class. So this will now inject all the classes which we need for the JPA repository. So this is done now. So what do we need next? So next we need to secure our application, right? So we need to enable the web security. So we need to enable web security. Now this is going to enable the Spring security for us. Okay, so as a part of that, we need to make our application extend the web configurer adapter. So we are going to extend the web security configurer adapter. So what we are going to do is we are going to override some key things from Spring security, and append our implementation into it. So what basically we need to do is we need to make it load the data from our database. Instead of Spring maintaining the username and password information, we are going to allow create an implementation so that Spring can use it. So if you see, let me go to the override. So if I need to override, there are lots of functions which the web security configurer adapter provides. So what we are going to do is we are going to override the authentication builder. So here in the authentication builder, so if you say auth dot, so here you have lots of options. So we can provide our authentication provider, we can provide the user detail service, so you can provide JDBC authentication, you can provide in-memory authentication. If you had seen my previous video, I would have done in-memory authentication. So here I'm going to show you an authentication with a service. So that service is going to connect to a database and get the data. So that is what we are going to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to append a user detail service. Okay, so let's create this user detail service. So we need to create this user detail service because we need to auto-wire these. Okay, we haven't created this user detail service because this is an interface, so we need to implement this particular interface. So let's implement this interface. So I'm going to create a package called service. So I'm going to call this a custom user details service. Okay, and I'm going to implement the user detail service. So along with the implementation, we are going to override this the load user by username method. So this is going to be a username. Okay, so what we are going to do here is we need to authenticate now and provide a object of type user details. Okay, so basically what we need to do is we need to create another model for us to convert it into a user detail. So if you notice your user details is another interface, we need to use we need to create another model out of this. So let's go ahead and create a model out of it. So I'm going to say custom user details. Okay, I'm going to give the destination package as com tech primers security dot security db example. I'm going to create it under model itself because it falls under the model, so it's a model basically. Why is it saying the destination package not found? I'm not sure. So let it create outside. Okay. Let me go ahead and navigate. Okay, so I don't know, for some reason I think it is trying since I created from Spring it is happening like that, but I'll just go ahead and directly create this file. So I'm just creating custom user details for us to create a user details finally, and we need to implement this particular class. So what we need to do is we need to provide some information here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this custom user details extend our users class. Okay, but so by that way we will have access to all our users because our users model is the one which is going to have all the user information which we retrieve from the database, right? So we are going to use that so that this custom user details can leverage data from that particular users table. So for example, here I'm going to say super dot get password, so I can directly get that. So and same way for username, I'm going to say super dot get username, get name. Okay, so I'm going to make the other fields as true. So is account non-expired? Yes, true. So is account not locked? Yes, true. Is account credential not expired? True. I'm going to enable as well. I'm going to make it true. It's true. Okay, so to this part I will let's come later to the get authorities. So meanwhile, so I'll create a constructor here. So whenever we create a custom users, I need to provide a user, right, users information, so that I can, so I'll, so that I can do a append. So if I call the users, now I think the constructor is not there. Let's create um, a users constructor in the users. Okay, so inside this constructor what we are going to do is we are going to assign all the values for the variables. So I'm going to say users dot get active. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy constructor. Basically from the child class, I'm going to use that to copy the values in the super class. So I'm saying I'm just going to copy everything. Okay, all the fields. So what are the fields are there? Users role. This dot name. Okay, and this dot last name. Yes. What other things are pending? And also the ID. So this dot ID. Come to users dot get ID. Is there anything else? ID, email, password, name, last name, active, password. We didn't do passwords. Users dot get password. Okay. So I think that's it. So we have copied all the variables. Okay, that's it. Okay. Now let's go to the service. So let's go to this service. Now finally, what we need to do here is we need to create a new custom user details, and here if you notice we need to pass the users. So I need to create this users, right? So I'll just create this users. So how do we get the value for this users? So we need to load it from the users repository, isn't it? So let's load it from the users repository. Okay, so we can use AutoWire or we can use constructor injection. So I'll use AutoWire in my case for simplicity. So I'm going to say users repository dot find by username, right? So I'm going to say find by name and I'm going to pass the username. So if you notice here this method doesn't exist, so I'm going to go ahead and create that. Okay, and if you notice this is going to return some users. So I'm going to mark this as optional of users, because what if the user name doesn't exist, right? It can happen. So I'm going to mark this as optional. So I'm going to use the Java 8 optional to wrap this particular return type into an optional, so that it is easier for me to handle null cases here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this into a variable called optional. I'm going to say optional users. Okay, so I don't have to do a null check, but I can do something. I'll show you what I can do. So I'm going to say if that particular optional is present, right? If the optional is present, then do something, and if the optional doesn't present, is empty basically. So actually what I'll do is, or else, so what I can do is I can throw an exception. So I'm going to throw an exception, new users username not found. Okay, saying username not found. So I'm just throwing an exception. So if the database did not return me any value, I'm just throwing an exception, so that the Spring framework will know that okay, the username doesn't exist and it can handle the exceptional scenario. However, what if what do I need to do if it is present, right? So if present, I need to get that, correct? So I'm going to say give me that users, and I need to create a custom user details using that users. Okay, so this will be something like this. So I need to assign this actually, so I can do It's not required actually, but yeah. But why is this guy, throwing an exception? Why is it can't resolve? So what I'll do, I'll assign this to a variable. Okay, so I'll just move this guy up so that we will not have any issue. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use the optional users and say if it is not having any value, throw this exception, and if it has a value, okay, I'm just saying it to return something. So I'm just saying it to do something there. Okay, so in this case, what I can do is I can use map. Okay, what I can do is I can use map to get that, right? So this one I'll return it into some custom detail object. In fact, I can refactor this again to make it inline. Okay, and I can remove this return type as well. Right, I can replace this with again lambda functions, and I can do this. Okay, so what we have done is we have created a new custom user detail here. If the value is present, okay, if the value is present, that's when this map will be called. So we are safe here, and then based on that we are returning the value again. Find, okay, I'm just going to seek it, that's fine. Okay, so this is going to return user detail objects, and customer user detail object is of type user details. Okay, this is an interface, so that is what we saw. And if the user did not exist, so we just directly threw the exception saying username not found. Okay, that is what we have done here, right? So this is the class which will be used by Spring here. So we have created a class which will be used by Spring. Okay, and we have created this as a service, so I'm just going to say service. So this particular class will be now used by Spring, so that we are doing in Spring Security. So we are going to tell Spring that, okay, this is the class which I want to inject so that you can use it for authorizing. Okay, so that is what I have done here. So I'm saying that, okay, auth.user details service, I am writing a custom user details service, and I'm providing that to the authentication provider. And then now I need to provide a password encoder. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some custom implementation. I'm not going to do any encoding. I'm just going to say return the same thing. Okay, that is what I'm doing here. I'm not doing anything, I'm just returning it into a, so I'll extract this into a method so that okay, so that it's easy for us to see. Okay, so I've just created a custom password encoder. So you can use any other existing one, but right now I'm not using any password encoder. So you, instead of creating this, you can have your own password encoder. There is a bcrypt password encoder which is there in Java by default. You can use that as well. Okay, so next one is we need to create some security for the HTTP REST endpoint. So that is what I'm doing here. If you notice, I just created a implementation, or basically I'm overriding the implementation of the HTTP security. So what we are doing here is we are going to disable the cross-site reference, and we are going to authorize all the requests which are going to have secure. So I created some secure, right? So I'm going to say authorize all my requests which are there under secured. So I'm just going to say star star if anything had secured, okay, authenticated. So what Spring will do is Spring MVC will now know that, okay, for this particular URL I need to authenticate it, and you'll go to Spring Security and ask, okay, where is my authorization. So that is when it comes to the user detail service, and it uses the username and password to do it. And also the one more thing, if let's say there is an authenticated request, and if it did not have anything authenticated already, it will move to the login page. So that is what we are doing here. So we are using the Spring Securities default login page. So I'm saying form login, that will have the Spring Securities default login page. If you have any custom login page, you can say login page and give the URL for that. Okay, so that Spring can get the data from that page and then route it. But for now I'm going to use Spring Securities login page. Okay, so I am not doing anything. So I just said form login. So this will have a default login page which Spring has, so which will expect me to provide a username and password. Okay, and I'm saying that permit all for that particular login page. And for any other request which is not secured, then I'm just saying okay, allow it. So that is what this particular statement means. So I'm saying any request which comes to the HTTP service, allow them, permit all. If it is secured in the REST endpoint, and then I authenticate it. Okay, so I have authenticated it here. Now I need to provide some role, right? So I right now have a role called admin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this particular REST endpoint saying something called pre-authorize. So if you notice, pre-authorize is something which Spring Security provides as an annotation, so that you can use it for method level authorization. So for example, like this. So what I'm doing here is, okay, I'm adding an annotation called pre-authorize. I'm saying authorize this method to be called only when the user has the role admin. Okay, so in order to enable this, we need to add a config. So in Spring Security, I need to enable global method security, and I need to say pre and post enable as true by default, because by default it's disabled. So I need to enable this. So I enable that using the annotation there. And now this particular method in a particular controller is now authenticated and authorized using this particular role. So authentication is when you allow somebody to use anything. Authorization is when you say that okay, you have the authority to use that particular method. So I'm saying that only admins can use this. Okay, so this particular REST endpoint will be now secured with admin. So if I don't have a admin role, then I won't be able to access this. Okay, that is what we are going to see now, right? So if somebody accesses this URL called secured slash all, Spring Security is now going to redirect you to the login page. Once you are logged in, it is going to redirect you to this particular page only if you have an admin role. Okay, if you again access that URL when you have the same session, so you will still be redirected to the same URL. So that is what we are going to see in this particular example. So what we have done is we have created a REST endpoint, okay, with different REST endpoints. So I'm just saying REST hello all as open, and I'm authorizing REST hello secured slash all with this particular role. Okay, and in the Spring Security, so we are telling Spring Boot application that okay, I'm going to use my custom user detail service, and I'm going to secure my REST endpoints with secured calls, and this is my password encoder. So I'm not using anything in the password encoder. Apart from that, I have created the custom user details class, which will be used by Spring Security. Okay, now one thing we missed, right? So we didn't provide any rules here. We didn't create the granted authority. So granted authority is something, but Spring Security uses this particular authority to identify what authorization rights you have. Okay, so the admin is one of the authority rights, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to provide that from the implementation to the Spring, so that Spring knows what are all the different roles which are there. So that is what we are going to implement here. So I need the get role. So I already have the roles here, right, in the form of get roles. I'm going to get those roles. Okay, and I'm going to assign them. So what I need to do is I need to create a new custom, new simple granted authority. So simple granted authority is already there in Spring Security, and I'm going to just pass a role name. So I'm going to say role dot get role. Okay, in general Spring actually has a notion of role underscore, so I'm just appending that because I my roles names are different, so I'm just appending that here. Okay, and this is going to be granted authority. So what I'm doing is I'm just using some stream API to create a new role, and I'm going to just collect this collectors dot to list. I'm just going to, because it's a list, the roles are list, so that is why we have this. Okay, so now once we have collected, we need to now return this directly. So this is nothing but a list of granted authority, so we are now going to return that directly. I'm going to say this just a list and just going to return this list. Okay, I can do that directly, in fact. Okay, so what we have done is we have got all the rules which we already have injected into the custom user details, and we are getting that and then creating a granted authority for Spring Security to understand. Okay, that is what we are doing here. I think that's it. We have filled all the other details, right? So another thing we need to do is we are using MySQL to connect to the database, MySQL database to connect from this application. So we need some properties, right? So I have already created some properties here. So I already created some properties. I just populated that using the template. Okay, so I already have some properties. I'm just giving the JDBC driver details, nothing else. That's it. So let's start our application. I'm going to say run. Okay, so already if you notice here I have the database open here. There are user details. So there is one particular user called Ajay with password as Ajay. Okay, and then the email is there, and the role which is assigned for that particular user is admin role. Okay, that is what we are going to see now. So let me check if the process is up. The Spring Boot application is coming up. I have also enabled the SQL commands for so there is a show SQL. I made it as true so that we can see what query it ran on the MySQL database to confirm that okay, our authentication is being triggered. Okay, so the server is up, so it's running on 8080 port. I'll just go to the 8080. Now I need to say rest slash hello slash all, right? So rest slash hello slash all is going to give me hello YouTube because that is all exposed right now, right? So there is no permission involved in that. So there was something called secured slash all which had some permission. So when I say secured slash all, if you notice here, immediately it redirected me to the login page. Okay, so this is the page where I need to provide the user detail. So I'm going to say, if let's say I provide a wrong user detail. Okay, so let's see what happens. So if I provide the wrong user details, it is showing me that your login attempt was not successful. Try again. Bad criteria, bad credentials. Okay, let me go and see in the logs. If you notice here in the log, I can see that Spring JPA Hibernate used a query to query our database. So basically, Spring Security is now using our query to authenticate us. Okay, so basically Spring Security is using our roles and tables to query that and confirm that okay, we are giving the correct username or not. So now I'm going to give the correct username. So I'm going to say uh, Ajay and Ajay. If you notice here, so if you notice here, now we are at the URL hello secured all and it's saying secured hello. Okay, that is what we expected, right? So we have a username with the admin role and that is what we saw. So we got redirected to the correct rest endpoint. If you notice here, we have a rest hello all and we have a secured all, and we authenticated with the username and we are able to now authenticate via Spring Security, and we are able to now see that. If I click on the rest endpoint again, if you notice here, I will be directly redirected. Okay, if I say login, I will then be prompted for the login now. Okay, if you notice, there is no rest login basically, so I will just go to login. In this case, now I will be, if I enter some other credential, it won't allow me. Okay, it will not allow me. So I'm going to say Ajay Ajay, and it has because it did not have any. So I had a secured hello secured all. So this is the rest endpoint. So if you notice here, I authenticated using my credential and then it is now allowing me to access this guy. So same way, if I have a new username, if I have a different username, let me try that, right? So I don't have I did not try that before, but let me try adding a new username. Okay, and we don't have any role for that particular user, so let's see what happens to that. So I'm going to say 2 and let the email be same, and I'm going to pass a different name for it. Let's say YouTube, and password also YouTube. Okay, I'll just insert this query and I'll just check it. I'm not going to assign any role for that particular user. Let's see what happens, right? YouTube is the password. So let me go ahead and log in here now. I'll just go to the login. I'm going to say YouTube and YouTube. So this is logged in now, but it didn't know where to go. That is why it is showing as error. Now let's go to rest slash hello slash secure all. Let's see what happens. If you notice, we got access is denied error. Okay, we were allowed to log in, but the access is now denied. Previously, if you notice, we were redirected when we did not log into the um, rest server. It was redirecting us directly to the login page, right? So if you notice here, the I have reset now. Let's say rest hello secure all. If I hit that, I see that access is denied because I already logged into YouTube. So if I now log into my older credential, right? So I'll just say okay, and I'll go to the rest endpoint rest slash hello slash secure slash all. If you notice, now I'm able to access it. Okay, because my username is different, and if I came from the other username, okay, we are not able to access. That is what this pre-authorize is doing. So pre-authorize is now authenticating that if we have this admin privilege or not. And if you notice here in the logs, how many ever time we did the authentication, that many queries are there here. So that is how we tell Spring Security to access using our database credentials. So I will just summarize again what we did. So initially what we did is we wrote a REST endpoint. Okay, we secured one REST endpoint with a role called admin, and we added a annotation called pre-authorize. So if you notice, pre-authorize is coming from Spring Security, and I'm giving a role saying okay, has any role. If you have multiple roles, you can assign something like this. So you can add multiple roles here. Okay, so you can do that. So right now we have only one role. So I'm saying that okay, secure this particular rest endpoint with admin and allow them only if it is admin. Okay, or else don't allow. Now we go to the security configuration. So we need to tell Spring Boot that when you bring it up, make Spring Security understand that it needs to know the custom user detail service. So we are creating a custom user detail service, and we are overriding the load user by username method from the user detail service. Okay, and we are now querying our database here. So this is the database query which we are doing. We are querying based on the username, and we are telling that okay, we are basically telling Spring that okay, these are my user details. So if the username exists, it will give the same username user details. If it doesn't exist, it will throw user not found. That is when you see that Brad credentials and stuff, right? So that is when it happens. Okay, so this particular implementation is now provided to the Spring Security framework using this particular web security configurer adapter, and that is what we are providing here. And we also provide the password encoder. Right now I'm not using any password encoder, so I'm just giving an empty implementation of the password encoder. I'm just returning whatever character I got. Okay, the next step is authenticating our basically authorizing our REST endpoints. So we are going to say that okay, HTTP security do this stuff. So go ahead and allow everything apart from secured. So if it is having a secured URL, authenticate it. Okay, if it doesn't have, so for example, I'll show you one more example. So let's add one more. Okay, one more get mapping. I'll not add pre-authorize. Okay, and I will use that for the YouTube URL. So whatever we YouTube username, right? So alternate, I'll just say alternate. I'll just that will show you how this particular admin role is now controlled. So alternate, right? So let this guy come up. Okay, even though we did not add pre-authorize, this will be authenticated because in the Spring Security we are telling Spring MVC that okay, secure this particular URL and then allow Spring Security to authenticate it. It will not check it for any authorization, but it will authenticate it. Okay, and we are also appending the form login. So for any authentication redirection, we are going to use Spring's form. If you have any custom form, you can just say form login and then use that particular URL. So these are the configurations which Spring Security requires. Also, we need to provide the annotations to enable Spring Security in the Spring Boot application. So we need to say at enable web security, and also we need to enable the global method security for that at pre-authorize stuff, right? So for that we need to enable it manually. So another thing is the JPA repositories, as you know already. In all my JPA examples I would have used that. So we just need to say at enable JPA repositories and provide the JPA repository package or the class, and I have some method there. The other thing is we need to create a custom user details which will be used by Spring. So if you notice inside the service which we created, the custom detail service, we are going to provide a custom user details, and inside that we are going to extend the users which is the entity for our database table relationship. Okay, so we are just extending from this guy and then creating a custom user details, and inside that we are providing some authorities. So we are going to create a granted authority which Spring Security requires. I'm just going to iterate what are all roles are there for that particular user, and then create a simple granted authority, and then I'm going to return that to Spring, so that Spring can use that for authentication authorization basically. Okay, now my Spring Boot application is up again. So let's just double check with the YouTube login, right? So if you notice here, I am going to secure all, and it is going to ask me the username and password. I'm going to say YouTube and YouTube, right? And this is going to tell me that access is forbidden, right? Because we authenticated but the authorization is not allowing because the page has admin rights, right? So and I don't have anything for this particular user. So but we created one more called alternate, right? So I'm going to click that alternate, and if you notice, I'm able to access that alternate from this user, right? So that is what Spring Security does. So Spring Security secures this secured REST endpoint, and using the pre-authorize, it allowed us to check the authorization. However, I did not have any authorization here, only authentication via this guy here, only authentication. So it allowed me, but it did not check for any role. So that is how you use Spring Security inside a Spring Boot application to leverage your database to get the credentials and validate them. Okay, so that is it, guys. So that's it from this video. If you want me to do any specific video on any specific topic, go ahead and mention that in the comment below. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, go ahead and subscribe. Also, I have created a Slack community now, so you can go to techprimers.slack.com. You can go ahead and collaborate with me there. So you can post in your comments there, you can post in your code there. We will be able to respond to your queries. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you very much.